Hello again, I'm David Fleeshman.
And I'm Sue Jenkins.
And welcome to the Saga Not Going Out Club.
And it's our session 4 of our drama workshop.
In session 3 we looked at improvisation, and we also looked at building a character through improvisation. So here in session 4, what we're going to look at is possibly the greatest writer that this country has ever known, and possibly the world, and of course that's William Shakespeare. Why is Shakespeare so important? Well, mention Shakespeare to some people, and what you get them to sort of go, Shakespeare, oh, I can't be doing with that.
Well, that's possibly because of the way it was taught at school years ago. You'd have one play, wouldn't you, for, as it was then, your O-level. And everybody always talks about that one play that they did. Maybe it was Julius Caesar or...
Macbeth's one, yes, they do a lot in school, and
Midsummer Night's Dream. And people talk about it as if it was a boring thing. So maybe it is the fault of the way it was taught, on a curriculum sort of thing.
Absolutely. And in all honesty, if people have no time for Shakespeare, no interest in Shakespeare, that's absolutely their prerogative, unless they work in the theatre, unless they are actors, because I don't think an actor should have that attitude about Shakespeare. I think it's very important for all actors, even if they never intend actually being in a Shakespeare production, it's not their thing, or necessarily go and see shows at the Royal Shakespeare Company, even if they don't get involved in Shakespeare, they need to have a basic understanding of why he was so important, where we are today theatrically, why he had such an influence both on writers and directors and actors and the theatre. And it's something that you either have a love for or you don't, but I think it's very important that all actors should have an interest in. So, William Shakespeare, of course, born 1564, died 1616. He only lasted 52 years, bless him, 52 years. He also, it's assumed, but not absolutely certain, that he was born and died on the same day, 23rd of April. We know he died on the 23rd of April, 1616. All we know is that he was baptised on the 26th of April in 1564, but the assumption was that he could have been born 3 days earlier. That's a nice little sort of package. And of course he was only 52 years old when he died. And only out of those 52 years, 28 of those years he was working. He moved from his home in Stratford down to London, I'm sure as you all know, and he worked as an actor, and he worked as a writer, and he worked as a director, and he set up a whole company of actors. And in those 28 years, he actually wrote a volume like this, full of all his plays and his sonnets. Let's not forget his poetry as well. Okay, and if you look how small the writing is, how much work there is, most people in 5 lifetimes, never mind 28 years, couldn't write this much. So he was, I think, a genius.
I do too.
So, Shakespeare, he wrote in the style of the time, the meter of the time, the poetry of the time, and that was called
iambic pentameter.
Mm-hmm.
And iambic pentameter basically is it's a rhythm. It's basically I am. It's an unstressed syllable and a stressed syllable, and pent of course is 5. It's a meter of 5 lots of 2. So you have rhythm is usually made up of a group of syllables, and they are called feet, and iambic describes the type of foot that it is. So it's 2. It's an unstressed syllable by a stressed and a group of 5. So 5 times 2 is 10. So the quality of mercy is not strange.
To be or not to be, that is the question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So yeah, and of course it's an indication of the meter of how Shakespeare wanted his words to be spoken. But of course it's not strictly, if you go to see a Shakespearean play today, everybody isn't talking in that absolute rhythm, but it's a guide. And we always say that Shakespeare very much told his actors how to say his words, because if you read a speech from Shakespeare, if he puts a comma, it really is an indication to take a breath. If he puts a full stop, absolutely a stop. But obviously, if there's nothing at the end of that line, you carry on. If you carry on, you get the absolute sense. So he really is a great help and a guide to his actors. And we always say he was one of the early practitioners, actually, wasn't he?
Yeah, because he told his actors how he wanted them to deliver the speech. In fact, in Hamlet, where Hamlet actually talks to the first player, the travelling players that come along to Elsinore, to the castle, to put on a play, he actually says to them, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounce it to you, trippingly on the tongue." He actually informed, that whole speech actually tells actors how he wants them to perform. So he was possibly one of the first, if not the first, practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually, when we're doing classes, we tend to go very carefully with Shakespeare, because we are faced often with students who think, oh no, Shakespeare, I don't think that's for me, you know, I'd rather just be on television in a modern piece. But we have some really good exercises for approaching Shakespeare.
Absolutely. Now you say to people who know very little about Shakespeare, nothing at all, you say, Can you quote Shakespeare? Do you know any lines of Shakespeare? There are two things they will come out with. Either to be or not to be, right? That's the classic, isn't it? Or Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Do they actually know what those speeches mean? Do they actually know what Hamlet means when he says to be or not to be? Do they know what Juliet is actually saying when she says, wherefore art thou Romeo? Now, unlike when we were starting out as drama students, the drama students today have a wonderful tool that's available to them, the internet. A, they can find out as much as possible, but B, there's a wonderful program on the internet, and it's called No Fear Shakespeare.
It's also a material book that you can actually buy, and No Fear Shakespeare tends to cover most plays. There's the odd, perhaps less known play that it doesn't deal with, but you can buy the material book, or you can go online and literally put in to be or not to be, and the whole verse will come up. But the difference with No Fear Shakespeare is, on the left side of the page, you'll have it as Shakespeare wrote it, and on the right side of the page is a modern translation. It is American, so it's slightly Americanized, but that doesn't matter. It tells you exactly, because we all, however much Shakespeare we've done, you kind of go, oh, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah, and once upon a time, you'd go on to those sort of little notes that you would get, you know, York notes or whatever. But now you can go on and you could read the whole play in the modern translation, as opposed to, it's a hard one to read a whole play of Shakespeare. Yeah.
But it's very good to, if you get a speech, you think, I'm not really sure what all the nuances in this speech are, what it actually means. And you have, as Sue rightly said, half and half. On one side of the page you've got Shakespeare, the other side you've got a modern day interpretation. We're going to give you an example of that. We printed off something from No Fear Shakespeare, some very famous speeches, the ones I mentioned. We've got To Be or Not to Be, and we've got Juliet's speech when she comes onto the balcony, and we're going to do a little bit in Shakespeare, and then you're going to hear the translation. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a go. So, get in the mood. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
And the No Fear Shakespeare, the question is it better to be alive or dead? Is it nobler to put up with all the nasty things that luck throws your way, or to fight against all those troubles by simply putting an end to them once and for all?
To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished.
Dying, sleeping, that's all dying is. A sleep that ends all the heartache and shocks that life on earth gives us. That's an achievement to wish for.
To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, There's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause.
To die, to sleep. To sleep, maybe to dream. Ah, but there's the catch. In death's sleep, who knows what kind of dreams might come after we've put the noise and commotion of life behind us. That's certainly something to worry about.
Good. Yeah. So, as you can see, that's very useful. And also, I think there, I'm sure most of you know, but how many people who have no interest in Shakespeare, have no interest in theatre, know that to be or not to be is about a man deciding whether or not to commit suicide. Okay? To be or not to be. It's quite simple. But a lot of people, you say, quote Shakespeare, to be or not to be. What does it mean? I don't know, Shakespeare.
Yeah, I think sometimes when a line is so well known that you almost become desensitized and don't actually think beyond the obvious.
Now, there is another famous line. I would think the second most important famous line that you would get if you ask someone to quote a little bit of Shakespeare, and they would come out with, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" And the assumption is that there's Juliet on a balcony screaming out, looking for Romeo.
Where are you?
Where are you, Romeo? Not the case. Let's do the first of all. Let's do the translation. She's going to be a wonder. She has played Juliet in her time.
A few years ago.
Yeah. Let's do the translation, the no fears translation of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or, if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo, why do you have to be Romeo? Forget about your father and change your name, or else, if you won't change your name, just swear you love me, and I'll stop being a Capulet.
'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name.
It's only your name that's my enemy. You'd still be yourself even if you stopped being a Montague. I mean, what's a Montague anyway? It isn't a hand, a foot, an arm, a face, or any other part of a man. Oh, be some other name.
What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo doff thy name, and for that name, which is no part of thee, take all myself.
What does a name mean? The thing we call a rose would smell just as sweet if we called it by any other name. Romeo would be just as perfect even if he wasn't called Romeo. Romeo, lose your name. Trade in your name, which really has nothing to do with you, and take all of me in exchange. So, very important. You can see there that when Juliet says, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" she is not crying out for Romeo. She doesn't know he's actually hiding in the garden below her balcony listening to what she's saying. This is her own thoughts. Wherefore art thou is not where are you? It's why are you? Why are you called Romeo Montague? Why? Now again, if you say to someone, "Can you quote a bit of Shakespeare?" and they go, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?"
Yes, and you see send-ups of people going like this.
Yeah, nothing to do with Shakespeare. So those are just two examples of how no fear Shakespeare actually puts you on the right track. Now, we've got a few quizzes for you, so you can go away and think about. First one, simple one. How many plays are supposedly attributed to Shakespeare? There's a little bit of debate, discrepancy amongst learned intellectuals about who he collaborated with, who he didn't collaborate with. But there is one number, and you can give or take one, of the amount of plays attributed to Shakespeare. So that's the first thing for you to go and discover, how many plays he wrote. Those plays, again, were actually categorized into, more often than not, 3 sections, right? There were 3 types of play, 3 genres. What were the 3 genres? Okay, so second quiz for you, second bit of homework. Finally, think of all the different versions of Shakespeare that have been not translated, but adapted for the different media. And that includes ballet, opera, musicals, films, major musical, both on stage and on film, set in New York, about the Jets and the Sharks, okay, the Montagues and the Capulets.
Should we give that one away?
No, I'm not giving the title away, but there's an example. There were others.
Many others.
There was a Disney animated film not too long ago that Elton John actually wrote the music for, that is quite loosely based on a famous Shakespeare play. And finally, Shakespeare was absolutely responsible for so many phrases.
You're reaching for them.
I'm reaching for my paper now, because I put it on the floor with my Romeo and Juliet. There it is. So many phrases that we use today, that we all use, whether we have any interest in Shakespeare or not, we use these terms, and they all were never used prior to Shakespeare. Now, let me just give you a few examples. As luck would have it, or as good luck would have it, to quote Shakespeare accurately, is from The Merry Wives of Windsor. Okay, bated breath, the Merchant of Venice. Brave New World. Now, Brave New World, of course, a lot of Shakespeare's words were then taken by great writers and used as titles of plays. Brave New World, of course, was one. Aldous Huxley. Brave New World comes from the Break the Ice. Break the Ice comes from Taming of the Shrew. Cold Comfort, again, Taming of the Shrew. Dead as a Doornail. Dead as a Doornail. That was Shakespeare. That was never used before Henry IV Part 2. We've got Faint-Hearted. What do you say?
I always say in one fell swoop. And of course that's from the Scottish play, as we say.
In one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Heart of Gold. That's from Henry V. We use all these terms, never before used before Shakespeare penned them. In my mind's eye. Hamlet. Okay. Laughing Stock, Merry Wives of Windsor. And they go on and on and on. Set My Teeth on Edge. There's another one. Set My Teeth on Edge. Henry IV, Part 1. Wild Goose Chase. Romeo and Juliet, Wear My Heart Upon My Sleeve.
Does the nurse say Wild Goose Chase? I don't know. I'm just wondering if she does.
I think so, because she. Yeah, I think it is the nurse who goes round. She's running around looking for. You send me on a wild goose chase when she comes back having met Romeo.
But we always say it is bizarre how a lot of people say, "Oh no, I've no time for Shakespeare," and yet spend a lot of their time with saying his phrases.
Now, obviously, a class on Shakespeare could go on for months. So this is just a smattering, just to say how important it is to us. We have, fortunately, over a long career, both involved in lots of different Shakespeare plays.
And directing, actually.
And we've directed.
Big open-air production.
Open-air productions, who's directed As You Like It and Midsummer Night's Dream. I recently was in a very big open-air production of Romeo and Juliet and Richard III up in York. So, yeah, we do enjoy Shakespeare and love Shakespeare, and I hope we've passed a little bit on to you, and I'm sure a lot of you already have, a lot of experience with Shakespeare. But for those of you who haven't, do check it out. There's plenty to find, both online and hopefully when the theatres reopen again, in theatre.
So look out for the quiz and for 1 or 2 exercises, a couple of speeches where you can really think about the iambic pentameter.
Yeah. No Fear Shakespeare. Check it out. Okay. Well, we'll say goodbye for now.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.